All right, so first it was the sellers. They say, hey, we're paying just too much in commissions. We want our money back, even though we agreed to pay this, even though we got the price we wanted. This is ridiculous. Let's file a lawsuit against the real estate industry. Now, you've got the buyers coming after the real estate industry who are filing a much bigger class action lawsuit. So this was just filed the other day. And so here's what's going on. 7 home buyers, led by this Maya Batten, filed an antitrust lawsuit on November 2nd, seeking class action status against Compass, EXP, Redfin, Weichert, United Real Estate, Howard Hanna, and Douglas Element. This is what they say. The defendants unlawfully anti-competitive conduct causes American home buyers to pay inflated commission for broker services they misrepresent as free. As a result, they end up paying inflated prices for homes that they purchased. Okay, here's the deal. They're seeking a nationwide class of everyone, all people who has ever bought in a home in the United States since December 1st, 1996, up to present day. That's the class that they're seeking. So, I mean, first off, this one is mind-boggling to me, even more than the last one. Yet, the plaintiffs were successful. So, what I wanted to do, you guys, is I kind of wanted to map out this story real quick, and I want the audience to listen and to see what I'm about to show them, and then we're going to get really deep into this. All right, so let me try to share this thing. You know how. So this is the way I see it, you guys. Okay, so we have. I'll start the story off with a seller named Bob, right? And Bob, of course, Dominic, right? He wants to sell his house. And Bob, when he decides to sell his house, says he wants $300,000 for his home. So what does Bob do? Bob has some choices to make. Bob can sell his house on his own as a for sale by owner, which is totally viable. Bob can hire a real estate agent. Bob can hire a discount brokerage. Bob can do many, many, many things. But in this scenario, Bob then decides to hire Joe, a real estate agent. They negotiate back and forth on what Joe is going to charge Bob in order to sell his house for $300,000. Okay, fine. They agree to pay Joe 5% to sell Bob's house. And in this case, that is what? $15,000, right? In total commission. Bob says that's fine. Joe then, as we'll call him the listing agent, which he is, Joe then lists the property into the open market by multiple different marketing channels. And lo and behold, here comes this buyer, Nancy. And Nancy says, wow, I really like this house that this character Bob has for sale for $300,000. And then Nancy phones her agent, Brian, and says, Brian, can we go see this house listed by this character, Joe, who's selling the house for Bob? And Brian says, sure, Nancy, be happy to get you into that property. They go see the house. Nancy says, wow, Brian, I love the house. Can we write an offer? Well, of course we can, Nancy. How much would you like to offer? Nancy has that opportunity to negotiate any price that she finds reasonable to pay for the house. Because what do we know about anything that sells? It's ultimately what the buyer decides to pay is how much something is ultimately worth. Bob is saying, I would like $300,000 for my home. As we know of everything sold in the world, it comes down to supply and demand. So Nancy goes and strategizes with her agent, Brian, and they decide to pay $300,000 for the house that Nancy loves. Nancy says, oh my gosh, Brian, that's amazing. Thank you so much. I got the house of my dreams. Bob gets his $300,000 that he wants. He pays his $15,000 to Joe, and all is happy. Not so fast, because we have one class who says, this is too much money. The sellers say, I don't want to pay this $15,000 anymore, even though I got the $300,000 that I was looking for in the beginning. And then we have yet another class of people all of a sudden who say, well, I don't want to pay these prices anymore for houses either. I feel like I'm paying too much money because of how much the realtor is getting paid. Yet the entire time, these parties had full rights to negotiate whatever they wanted. They had full autonomy to make any decision that they wanted. And now that one of these class action lawsuits was, won potentially. Now, obviously, it's going to go to it's going to continue to get fought in court. The buyers say, well, man, we would like a couple $1 billion too. Let's sign up for this. So this is where we sit today. The thing that I don't understand, the seller one, although super unclear to me too, the buyer one is even more so, because who's paying for commissions? Who's paying for the commissions? That's what this entire lawsuit's about. It's coming off of the seller's net proceeds. The seller pays for transfer tax. The seller pays their mortgage off. The seller pays for tax prorations, and the seller pays for real estate commissions. The price of the home is irrelevant. And even if it wasn't, nobody is making the buyer pay the price. It's the buyer who determines value, because it's the buyer saying, this is what I'd be willing to pay for that house. Commissions or not. Commissions or not. Well, Brandon, we disagree. Okay, let's look at one more theory, gentlemen, shall we? No, we think we're paying too much. If that person didn't have a real estate agent, we believe we could get the house for less money. Okay, let's look at the evidence, shall we? Okay, now comes another character to the story. I want everybody to meet, we're going to call her Jill. Jill is a seller who's selling her house for sale by owner. No real estate agent whatsoever. Jill also wants $300,000 for her house. What these buyers are saying is they could go see Jill and say to Jill, well, Jill, I see you're selling for sale by owner. You don't have a real estate agent, which means you're probably saving what, 5-6%? We would like to purchase your home for less the $15,000 that our buddy Joe's paying. Well, what do you think Jill is going to say to the buyer who asks for the house for $15,000 less? She's going to say, yeah, no thanks. Go, bye-bye, kick rocks. That's not how it works. That's the only evidence that we have to suggest that the price of the home and the commissions agents charge to sell it as a service have nothing to do with one another. All right, I digress. Dominic, go ahead. We'll come to you first, and I'll come off story time.
Well, all right. I'm not sure where to start here. I guess I'll start with where you finished off on your diagram, because we've had that conversation a bunch of times and we disagree on some points. And the last diagram with the for sale by owner, I agree with you to the extent that the for sale by owner would be able to collect that amount from a buyer. A buyer would have to pay what the for sale by owner is asking, whether there's an agent involved or not. If there is no similar house available that's similarly priced, the for sale by owner would then be able to collect more net amount in their pocket than they would if they were listed with an agent. However, if two of the same homes were for sale for the same price, same neighborhood, same floor plan, same condition, one had an agent, one didn't have an agent, I know from personal experience that a buyer is going to say, hey man, I like your house, but there's no agent involved. So, why don't we share in that? Why don't we cut that down a little bit? And of course, right out of the gate, the FSBO is going to be like, no way. But if they can't sell it right away, they're going to have to take that into consideration. So that's where I stand on that.
Okay, so hold on. Let me just so there was a bunch of hypotheticals though, like because the case isn't about if they can sell it, if they can't sell it, comparable home. That's not what's being argued. What's being argued is the buyer of the house is suggesting that they're paying too much for a house because there are real estate commissions involved. That's what they're arguing.
Yep.
Which would suggest that if there was not a real estate agent, forget comparables, another house listed or not listed. It's the buyers are suggesting that every seller, if they didn't have an agent, would be willing to sell the house for a lower price. The case is around paying inflated home prices. So they're saying if there's no agents involved, then the sellers would be selling these houses to me for less money. I don't know of a seller that would be willing to do that because, again, the seller wakes up in the morning and says, well, I want what I want for my house. Mm-hmm. I would prefer to get and net as much of that as possible with or without an agent. Just like the example I gave, Jill, the for sale by owner, who says, I want $300,000 for my house, gets approached by a buyer who says, you don't have any agents. I want you to cut the price that you say you want by $15,000. Jill is going to hang up on that person and never talk to them again. And I believe every home seller would respond that way. It doesn't matter if there's an agent involved. The seller wants what the seller wants.
I agree with you about that, yes.
And so that's what this case is about. This case is about the buyer saying, when I purchased a home since 1996, I believe I've been paying too much for these houses because of real estate commissions.
Yeah. And so what you're saying is if all of a sudden we removed all the buyer's agents and that commission was no longer being paid to a buyer's agent, that the seller would just keep more of that money.
That's it.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you. If all of a sudden all buyer's agents were gone, then the price would be what the price would be. Whether they adjust down or not is irrelevant. The price would be what it would be, just like it is now.
Yeah. The seller says, I want X.
Yep.
The buyer says, I'll either agree to give you X or I will agree to give you Y. It's only when those two parties agree that a sale is consummated, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about here. So the seller says, I want this price. Buyers are the ones writing the offer. They get to decide, how much do I want to buy this house for? What am I willing to buy this house for? Mm-hmm. And they go and write the offer. They sign the offer. They go get a mortgage to justify the offer. The bank goes in and appraises the house to verify that they're not overpaying for the house. Mm-hmm. That's another point that I have on my notes. And the buyer says, great, beautiful. I got what I wanted. The commission is irrelevant. That's why I cannot even believe, well, I take that back. I can believe an attorney would take this case because it's a money grab for these attorneys, period, end of story.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't see it any other way. Ben, I mean, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, it's I'm trying to articulate this the right way. It's an after fact, right? No, I don't believe sellers look at it and they say, all I need is $100K net at the end of the day, so let's list it for that. No, they reverse that and they say, this is what I believe it's worth, minus all that stuff, and this is what I get. Now, they want that number, the net number, to be as high as possible, obviously. Why wouldn't you? Now, so that's the piece, right, that I think we're missing here.
Ben nailed it. Let me just I'm a visual, call me a visual freak. You both are analyticals. I'm a visual freak. So you got to let me have my games with my whiteboard. Okay. I think what Ben just said is he articulated it better than me. I think he nailed it. When the seller does not start with the end in mind. They don't say, okay, here's what I'd like to net, honey. They don't talk like that. They say, babe, I want to sell this house. What do you think we can get? We could probably get around $500K, I think. This is the number they talk about at Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas morning, when they're out on a walk. They're saying, what do you think we can get? What do you think we can get? What do you think we can get? Are we all in alignment with that? Dominic, do you see that differently? Do you think that sellers don't talk about how much they think they could sell their house for?
I agree that they do talk about that, but how many listing presentations have you been on, or prospects have you talked to, or for sale by owners have you talked to that say, I got to get 450 in hand out of this or I just can't make this move. So they do consider what the bottom line is, but the top number, that's what's talked about at Thanksgiving. Yeah,
they're all about their sale price.
Yeah.
This is what they believe that they can get, right?
Yep.
I would argue even that, and maybe I'm wrong, please correct me. I would argue that sellers don't sometimes, just because not all realtors walk through the net sheet, they don't know exactly what they're going to net until they get close to closing.
Great point too. I mean, so I know, Dominic, you don't like that, but so my personal experience in coaching real estate agents, hold on, and then we'll get into this. When I ask a room of real estate agents, how many of you present a net sheet at your listing appointment? It's like 80-20. 20% do, 80% do not.
Yeah,
they only talk about
50-50, right?
They talk about list price.
That's right.
They only talk about list price. And so the seller has this mindset of, okay, I'm going to sell for X price. And their net comes off. It doesn't get added on top, right? And so putting that even aside, it's the buyers we're talking about now. Now the buyer, who cares what the seller wants or decides to do, rather? Yeah. It's the buyer who is the one that's agreeing to pay it. So commissions aside, it's the buyer who is determining ultimate value. Because like anything, right? Like a watch, like this Rolex watch, I agreed to pay overpriced. This thing I paid ridiculous amount for. Why? Because supply and demand. You can get this watch for a lot less now than what I paid for it. But guess who was the dum-dum who paid the price? Was it Rolex? Or was it Brandon who said, Rolex has this listed at X price? Brandon wrote the check. Brandon gave the credit card.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
Okay. So you bought that Rolex. How much commission did the guy who sold it to you get?
I have no idea.
Because he didn't care.
Let me use this example.
So that's a great point. Yeah, go ahead, Ben. Go.
So, okay. You, if you invest in a stock, whether you have, like now you've got these Robin Hoods and all these different things, you buy that stock for a price. Whether, if you have a broker that helped facilitate that, you pay that broker fee, that commission after. Not like, it doesn't determine the price, right? And I think that's the piece. So maybe you help me unpack that a little bit more.
Well, watch.
Does that make sense?
I think so, but like this is going back to Dominic's analogy, right? So this stupid thing would go. All right. Again, you have the seller who says, we want this amount. And in a seller's market, there are more of the buyers than there are of the sellers. This is simple supply and demand. So the seller, of course, is going to get a higher price, right? The buyers are the ones agreeing to pay the price. Why? Because there aren't any homes to choose from. And so commissions are irrelevant. It's either you want the house or you do not want the house. It's not, the buyers aren't, when the market's different, then they negotiate, right? A lower list to sales price ratio. But it's not the commission that is at the heart of the negotiation. It's the price that is at the heart of the negotiation.
I totally agree. Totally agree. You paid the price for your watch without caring how much commission the salesperson that sold it to you is going to get. Whether he got something or nothing is irrelevant to you. And in this new lawsuit, if they win, and I mean, this is like $200 billion or something.
It's crazy.
Get back to that in a second. But if all buyers agents went away, if all agents went away, the price will all of a sudden just be the price.
That's exactly right. That's the whole thing.
The prices of real estate aren't going to go down if all of a sudden everybody's out of it. The price will just remain the price. If there's nothing to compare to, the price is the price.
You and I agree. I love it. And it's the buyer. Again, I agreed to buy the watch because I couldn't get one. So if I wanted it, I could have either waited for the market to change, right? More watches hitting the market, more cars hitting the market. Used cars are really going down now. And so that's why I'm glad I sold my cars when I did. And so this is just a byproduct of the market. How the agent commission is getting involved with this is simply a strategy for the legal industry. Period. That's all that this is. This is because here's their argument. Their argument is that people are getting taken advantage of and people are paying too much. What about the attorneys on these cases? You talk about taking advantage of, they're making more than any of these protected classes have the ability to make or lose.
Yeah, I mean, from a philosophical level, yeah, you're absolutely right. The attorneys are always the winners in these things. I mean, this last lawsuit, all the plaintiffs, if they get paid, which they won't, $2 billion, where's $200 billion going to come from? A government can't even come up with that.
Yeah.
It's just this is purely punitive. And I feel like there's an underlying bitterness here, Brandon, Ben. There's bitterness. There's animosity towards people that go out into the workplace and get paid based on the value that they provide. So why not just do away with all commission salespeople? Make it all a Soviet era style flat rate. You do a job, you get paid no matter how good you are at the job. You get the same money as Jojo next to you. That's what I think this is. There is definitely an undercurrent of bitterness towards people who get paid based on the value they provide.
Exactly. I can't understand how a court of law can see it any other way. Like, these people, real estate agents, got hired to do a job. There was full transparency. There was a contract signed. There was a negotiation that happened. Everybody agreed. Everybody had multiple times to agree, right? You list a home, you see a home, you write an offer on a home, you negotiate the price, you do an inspection on the property, you sit at a freaking closing table for 2 hours, staring each other dead nuts in the eyes over all these legal contracts that fully outline how much everybody is getting paid, how much you agree to get paid, how much seller you agree to walk away from this table, and everybody's agreeing to it. It would be like, based on what you just said, I mean, what would stop employers then? Because the buyer and the seller are the employers, right? The real estate agents work for the buyer and seller. What would be different than all these people that are suing the real estate industry? What if their employers all came back to them and said, hey, all that money we paid you for the work you guys did here, we want all that back. Yeah, we want all that back. We've thought about it for the last 20 years, and we think that we overpaid you. Yeah, right. That's what's happening here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a service. It can't dictate the price of the product.
That's right. That's yeah, Ben, you're all over that. That is a great point. This has nothing to do, Dominic, this is where I think you and I debated a couple months ago. I am in full alignment with what Ben just said, that a service that somebody hires somebody to do does not reflect in the goods or services of the product or service in which is being sold. You know, because here's the thing, watch. This is another point I almost forgot. How many sellers, going back to your point, Dominic, say, well, I want $450. You could just put your commission on top of it.
Yeah,
and it doesn't work that way.
Do that. For sale by owners do that.
Yeah. And how often does that actually happen?
Yeah, pretty much never, because it's not going to appraise like that.
And no buyer's going to buy it. So that's the point. It comes off the sales price, which is, again, more evidence for me that buyers, in fact, are not overpaying for houses. What they pay have nothing to do with the commission. Now, the other point in the lawsuit, I think, potentially has you can argue it. That is this piece. That is, let me go back. To pay inflated commission for broker services that they misrepresent as free. I wanted to talk to you guys about that point. You can argue that. I know, right? So this is a hard one. This is super hard because the buyer isn't paying for it. The seller pays the listing agent all the commission, all of it. All real estate commissions are paid by sellers. And it's the listing agent who decides, all right, I'll give some of this to this other guy to help me sell the house. So how do you guys view that point around, A, the service in which buyer's agents offer. Do you believe that it's free? Do you feel like buyers are paying for it somehow?
Yes. So if you drew your little house and there was a $300,000 price tag on that house, and buyer Jill comes along and she agrees to pay $300,000, and she gets her bank to sign off on that. She's got a mortgage for $300,000. She gives the seller $300,000.
Okay.
Right. So who is paying the seller, and how much is she paying? She's paying $300,000, right?
Right.
So the money's gone from her. She has agreed to pay $300,000. So she's paying for whatever the seller has to offer, which includes the piece of real property and the services that the seller employed to help attract Jill to find the property in the first place. It all adds up to $300,000, and nobody other than Jill and her lender are paying for those services. Like, she's the one stroking the check for the whole package. And
so
then
here's
the seller has got to divvy that up accordingly. He's only at $285 for his house in his pocket, but Jill paid for the whole package.
So your argument you're making is kind of the one that these buyers are making. You're saying that Jill is ultimately paying for the services of these two human beings.
Yeah, she's the one writing the check. She's not paying $285 for the house. She's paying $300.
Okay.
That's
question. Watch. Hold on. So question. So here's the counter argument to that. Okay. Now, watch this, Dom. Look at the screen.
Yep.
What would be different now? Those two people disappear.
Yep.
Same thing.
Seller wants paying $300 for the house.
So what's the difference? So how can you make the argument that Jill is overpaying for the house? It was just because there was agents involved, but if there's no agents involved, then she got a fair price?
Well, now, I didn't say she's overpaying. I didn't say that. I said that she's paying for the whole thing, the whole package, the piece of real property, and then whatever the seller had to include in order to get the property sold. So how much the seller puts in his pocket is irrelevant to Jill. She's paying for the whole thing, whether he spent 10 grand, 5 grand, or 50 grand to attract her to it. Her price is the same.
Right. So I believe the seller is the one paying, right? It's the seller, because agents involved or not, if there are agents involved, seller gets less. If there are no agents involved, seller gets more. Jill pays the same price.
Yeah, I mean, so
remember, the seller is paying for the service out of his proceeds.
That's right. But the buyer is writing the check for the whole package. So you can argue, I can just argue
that's
this
where
from
the money
both
comes
sides
from
all day long.
That's where the money comes from, the buyer.
Yeah.
But she's not paying them. The seller is. It's like walking into a store and saying, I'm paying your salary. I'm paying your salary. I'm paying your salary because I bought this Snickers bar.
Isn't it true?
The seller is paying, or the owner of the business is paying them with funds that he receives from running his business.
So if you were going to buy a Snicker bar, you could make the argument that it's cheaper to buy it out of a vending machine from a store than from a store with an employee selling it to you.
But is it?
I don't know. Is it?
It's a commodity. They're the same price everywhere. People have higher margins. Just go back to this. If this variable right here, the price in which Jill pays is the same if option A, there are two agents, or B, no agents. Jill pays the same price. We all agree that that's the case.
Yes.
So how can you make the argument then if in option B we have no issue, right? No agents, no issue?
Yep.
In option A, when there's agents involved, now Jill gets concerned. But either way, she paid the same thing. It's the seller who is the one who's walking away from that transaction, that these two parties agreed to sell something and buy something for X price. It was the seller who decided to have a service that they chose to pay for in order to consummate the sale of this transaction. Jill and what Jill agrees to pay has nothing to do with the services in which the seller agreed to. It's the seller who comes out with just less money. Jill's paying the same price no matter what. So how can the argument be that Jill is paying? I know you're not saying this. The suit's saying that Jill, buyers, are paying more for these houses because there are agents involved.
Yes, the suit is saying that, and what I'm saying is, without the benefit of comparison, if all of a sudden, a snap of a fingers, agents went away, Jill's paying the same for the house.
That's exactly right.
So this suit has even less basis than the other suit.
Yes, much less. Now, how it gets argued, it'll just be interesting to see. I'm dumbfounded. Again, the other one that just got ruled on last week or whatever, there's a big argument there. Sellers, that just proves this entire point, because the sellers are paying for the service, right? That's why there was a lawsuit to say, hey, I think we're paying too much. We want to pay less. The jury found that to be the case, and they ruled in those sellers' favor. Whether you agree with it or not, that's what happened. Now, I don't see how you can make the same argument, not you, Dominic, the buyers. How can the opposing party make the same argument that the seller just won? Because they contradict one another. If the sellers are saying, hey, we paid too much, and the jury says, yep, we agree with you, the sellers paid it all. How can another group of people also make the same argument when they didn't pay it?
Well, now that's going to put the judicial system in a little bit of a pickle, because somebody's going to have to come out right and somebody's going to have to come out wrong. Both sides can't say they're paying too much for the same reason, can they?
That's right. This is crazy. This is madness. And again, this is just simply attorneys saying, okay, we saw one attorney do it. He just got 1.8 billion or 5 billion with damages. Let's go do this on the other side. I mean, let's just hammer the real estate industry. And if these juries are paying out billions, it's just a strategy for the attorneys. So anyways, we'll see what happens.
So on the buy side, right?
Yes.
Are they saying, I wanted an opportunity to negotiate this commission with the buyer's agent, and so that, like, if I wanted that service, I want to pay for it? Or are they purely saying that if I choose to go unrepresented, right? Like, because you can't have your cake and eat it too, get the representation and get it for free, right? So, sorry, that first point, or like, I just want to go unrepresented and then get less on the purchase price. Like, is that the argument?
I think that's the argument. Yeah,
that's the argument. But what they fail to understand is that there is a massive assumption that if they're in a negotiation with the buyer and seller, right? So Dominic's the seller, I'm the buyer. And I go to Dominic and say, hey, I know you want $300,000 for this house. I just told my agent, Ben, to take a hike. Okay. Can you lower the price 15 grand? They believe that the sellers will say, yeah, sure, no problem.
Why didn't they do that?
I agree. That's exactly what they're saying.
They should have done that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, because you could have called the listing agent and said, I'm unrepresented, right? Yeah. And can you run this for us, and I'll pay $7 grand less? Why didn't they do it? They could have. It's negotiable. That's
right. That's exactly right. No one is making you pay the price that you agreed to pay. You wanted the house. It was the perfect. Here's the other thing. These buyers that are filing these suits are living in the houses that they agreed they paid too much for. That was a huge benefit for them.
That's the problem. I see the seller side. Like, they brought this up at the highest point. The buyers are the ones that actually overpaid for it, not because of commissions, because they overpaid for it just based on supply and demand.
The market.
That's right.
The market. And now that the market is turning, it's like, yeah. Anyway,
this suit goes back to like 1996.
That's true.
They're trying to cover 25 years, whatever that is, 25, 30 years, 27 years worth of buyers. So yeah, I mean, this
is the one to watch.